All right, we should go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen real quick. Actually, I don't really need to share my screen. We're just discussing the resizing stuff, so I'll just hand it off to Ahmad.
Hello, let me just share my screen. Okay, let's see if I can. All right, hopefully you guys should be able to see my screen. I'm trying to. Okay. So we discussed
Yeah, we
last.
see it.
All right, thank you. So we discussed last week about the online offline expansion. We discussed. I'll just. We discussed whether it is worth doing this capability change that deprecates or removes the plugin's ability to declare offline online expansion capability in 2.0. Or so we have three options. uh, if I may say, there are three options. Let me just options in front of us. One is deprecate the plugin capabilities now. So this is by keeping offline online supported, but just dropping dropping them from get plugin capabilities call. Second one is wait for 2.0 and drop the capabilities there. I think we agreed kind of that we reintroducing it as alpha will be problematic, and reintroducing it as introducing volume, but we can explain one expansion as alpha will be problematic. Third is option is to relax the wording around shall to should. And I've been thinking about another option, and I have filed an issue that is like the CEOs, that is at least in Kubernetes, in this case, can actually can just choose to respect the volume in use error that is returned when CO tries to expand the in-use volume, and the volume supports driver only supports offline expansion. So the CO will receive this volume in use, failed precondition error, and it checks the best case check. It performs that, okay, volume in use, and it backs off and it retries after checking again if volume in use or not. So that's another fourth option I've been thinking about. Where is it? Oh, sorry. Uh, use volume in use. So basically, this is more like option one, except we don't make a spec change, but just use volume in use error in CO, which is in this case resize controller of Kubernetes. So this kind of gives us, this is mostly like option one, almost exactly like option one, except we don't make spec change. And this gives us the option that the plugin authors, they still receive first time one control expand volume call, even if they only support offline, they return volume in use error. So it doesn't come to them as a surprise that, oh, I only implemented offline expansion, why am I receiving controller expand volume call now? So they return proper error code, volume in use error code. And it kind of makes uh, it makes the plugin authors handle the scenario. It makes CO respect volume in use error for offline expansion correctly and make it work. This still does mean that this still does mean that the capabilities are not respected, because the CO will still make at least one time one call to the controller. CO will still make one call.
Isn't that what we were calling option number 2 in the, I think it was a couple times ago?
Yeah, option 1 actually, like the one that
Okay.
yeah. So this is the only change is that we could do this now without making the change in the CEO, but and I spoke with Zing and it's something works for her. This we should do anyway. This option we should do anyway. But if we have to kind of dropping or deprecating the capabilities means breaking backward compatibility on other issues, and we have to consider 2.0, and this is an option we can do. And at least while talking with Zing, I think it's something Kubernetes can live with, at least, like
So
as far as I.
unless I'm missing something, it kind of seems to me like options 1, 2, and 4 could all be done at the same time, right? Like you would deprecate the things now. Deprecating now implies that in 2.0 you're going to drop it, right? So 1 and 2 are not mutually exclusive unless I'm missing something. And then option 4 is also not really mutually exclusive unless you're saying that Kubernetes is all of a sudden going to start using this capability.
I think option 1 was to deprecate and then remove in a 1 dot release. Like,
But
We did not.
I mean, that's not what deprecation means to me. Deprecation means we're planning to remove it.
I'm just referring to what the last conversation sounded like. It sounded like there was a put it in a noted as deprecated, but then we'll remove it and not create a 2.0 release. So, which is why I think the option's separate listed.
Well, I think that the thing is that we have never deprecated anything in CSI after 1.0. Correct me if I'm wrong, James and Saad. So if we deprecate it, we still keep the plugin calls. It is like kind of we have to is it backward compatible to deprecate it? It's obviously, like in strict technical sense, it is backward compatible, like purely technical sense, because plugins can still populate those fields. But and then there's a question of so there's two changes in PR. One is it deprecates this, and another one is it changes the wording of what it means for controller expand volume, because previously the wording says this call may be made by CO during any time in life cycle of the volume after creation if plugin has online capability. Now it says this call may be made by CO during any time in life cycle of the volume after creation, but an SP may not permit controller expansion of volume after which are controller published or available on a node, in which case the plugin may return gRPC error called failed precondition. So deprecating the plugin, deprecating the capabilities is one thing, but the other thing is that we are changing the wording around controller expand volume, and we are not using online offline wording anymore in the rest of the spec.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so I mean, this all seems fine to me. I guess just to kind of bring it back a little bit so we're all on the same page. My understanding of deprecation is saying we plan to remove this. So to me, option 1 implies option 2, right? This is a breaking change. We're not going to make it in a point release because it's a breaking change, but we plan to remove it. So if you're writing a new thing, you shouldn't use this. So I guess wouldn't it make sense that option 1 implies option 2 the next time you roll a major version?
I think it does the way I think it does, like I said, the way it's written, but it was kind of discussed as if no one's using it and it doesn't work for anyone, then maybe it should just be removed. And so, and again, maybe I'm speaking incorrectly here, but it sounded like that was being thrown around as an option.
But I think that it's not true that no one's using it. So currently we have SPs that are declaring offline. So if we change it.
No, when I said no one using it, sorry. When I said no one using it, I mean the COs.
the COs are not checking the capabilities.
So we know Kubernetes doesn't use it. we didn't check if Nomad or anything else that implements CSI uses it or checks it, as Kaman said.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we know well, we don't know, but we're pretty sure that no CO is doing anything with it. But I guess to me, that doesn't really matter because, we're trying to implement semantic versioning. We're talking about a breaking change.
Absolutely. I'm not in disagreement. I'm just defining why there's two separate options listed that sound like the same thing, but aren't.
Okay.
I'm not I completely understand and
No,
agree
I mean,
with what you're saying.
I guess the converse also is a little strange to me. Like if we were to deprecate something and say, yeah, we're going to leave it deprecated forever, that's also peculiar, right? Because deprecated means, to me, means like, yeah, this is something that's going to go away. So, anyway, right.
Yeah. Okay.
That made my point. Move on.
So I would like to hear from James and Saad. Like, what is?
I think the realistic options in my head are either, deprecate, cut a 2.0 and start over, or deprecate and, make a breaking change in a 1x release, not cut a 2.0. And admit that we screwed up, put out an announcement saying that this capability is going away. It was never honored. To avoid further confusion, we're eliminating it. By eliminating it, that just means we put a permanent comment on there that says it's deprecated, don't use it. We can't actually remove it from the protobuf. And that way the COs are safe to ignore it. And we can have the volume and use error handling as a escape hatch for whoever really needs it, with the reality being offline is a really bad user experience because of the race conditions that Chris mentioned in the last call, which we can document. I think that is the option I'm leaning towards, because the alternative of doing it the right way, of cutting a 2.0 release, is going to require a lot of overhead and is going to introduce possibly multiple quarters of delay in getting this feature out. And so that's why I'm leaning towards. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to back it up a little bit, it sounds like your assumption is deprecating it constitutes a breaking change. Is that true? Because I wouldn't think it would, right? Deprecating is essentially just a comment.
It's not a breaking change in the sense that the protos are going to fail. It's a breaking change in terms of, I guess, expectations per the spec, right? If I am a CSI driver author and I implemented CSI 1.2, the CSI spec is very clear that I as an SP can advertise an offline capability and what I should expect because of it. And so my assumption is that if I wrote to the spec per 1.2, moving forward as 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 are adopted, I should get the same behavior. But if we go and deprecate this flag, we're effectively saying, hey, you're not going to get the same behavior. But that's only because the reality is that the COs never actually implemented this behavior. So that's why I'm willing to kind of go with it and say it's okay, because today it's not immediately obvious to the SP who's reading the spec. In the future, at least this will be obvious.
Yeah, I guess I feel like that's a broader definition of breaking change than I had considered. Particularly, but as you say, the reality is we're not actually changing anything, and the breaking was already happening.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think there's various degrees of what we want to call backwards compatibility breaking changes. I think the model that we try to align with is with Kubernetes, and in Kubernetes, functional kind of behavioral changes are protected under backwards compatibility. And and that's the bar we're trying to keep. But I'm okay breaking that bar for this. I think we've circled the drain on this long enough. I think it's time to make a call. What does everyone else think?
I think I'm in agreement with you as far as what the options are, Assad, and I'm fine either way with the A or the B that you listed, right? Either deprecate and cut 2.0 or deprecate and cut in 1.x. I understand the time constraints, so I understand why you're leaning towards deprecate and cut in 1x. That's fine.
So the thing about 2.0 is if we were to count it into 2.0, there's a bunch of other things we know are broken we'd also want to fix before moving to 2.0.
I think that's a separate discussion. Like, I mean,
I know, but I'm
talk
sorry.
about other things to
Timeline wise, like I don't think you can just say, oh, we're going to cut 2.0 and fix this, because then it's like, well, wait a minute, we need to have all the other discussions, and that's going to slow it down by that much more. So I agree about the options, but I don't think 2.0 is a good goal. I mean, is a good way to address this. We should stay on 1.x until we're really ready to go to 2.0 and fix all of the problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably gonna, there's probably additional discussion about what the mandate is, right, for 2.0, like if it's gonna fix all the problems or whatever. So I don't, and we don't need
I would hope so, because there's some really big problems. And if I had assumed that maybe 2.0 was years away and it's not worth worrying about it, but if people are seriously interested in considering a 2.0 sometime soon, like I will get to work on coming up with proposals for fixing things that are broken. Especially the whole concept of access modes, and do they apply to the node or do they apply to the pod? Because that's an extraordinarily thorny distinction that was not made the first time around.
I mean, and it sounds like given the timeline constraints around a 2.0, like maybe those discussions, like maybe we should start talking about that in the community meetings, right? Like, let's figure out what we want in 2.0, because we know it's going to take at least a year to get this out, and we might as well start that process now because it'll be a while, right? So,
idea.
Okay. Zing, does that like work for you? Like so we deprecate the call, the get plugin fields in the get plugin capability response, and we change the wording that has this says, all right, like just replaces the wording online offline with like these replacements, and I guess the exact wording thing we can take it out in the discuss in the PR. Anybody has like Zing, does it work for you, like, or?
Yeah, I think it was 1.x. I think it's sounds more reasonable. Deprecate and cut 1.3, I think.
And I think the key on that is just making sure that none of the COs use it. I know that it sounds like none do, but just making sure. I think someone's going to check with Nomad to see if their implementation made use of it.
Yeah, okay, I had it. I should have done this actually already. Apologize for not doing it. Like, we're pretty sure nobody's using it, but yeah, it's worth double checking it. All right. Should we move on, try to conclusion, and like, or should we discuss?
I just wanted to get very concrete about this. It sounds like we're in agreement that we want to deprecate online offline in a 1x release. So question, which release do we want that to go into? 1.3 is the next release. Do we want to immediately do it?
Yeah, there was some discussion of like pre-deprecation notice or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I was arguing for that, but I got convinced against it because I think the argument was kind of like, why? What is the benefit of delaying it? Because today it's not respected anyway, and you're just, making the problem worse by waiting longer to warn people.
Right. The implementation that we're not going to give you is for sure not going to happen sometime. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So deprecate meaning that it's actually still should be working, although I know that CO is not, coordinator is not using it, but a deprecation meaning that just add a note there, right? Deprecated, but not really removing it yet, right? So it's not.
We will never remove the proto, because once the proto is there, you can't remove it. It's.
Oh, but what if in the future we don't want it? It's still just set deprecated? What?
We can remove it in 2.0. But until 2.0, it's going to live there as a pen,
so it's still kind of, it's still like usable, basically. If people want to use it, it's still there. It can be used.
Someone wants to set it, they can set it, but the comments should just say, this is deprecated, don't set it. It will be ignored.
So basically, in the plugin implementation, you don't have to go change your code to get it to compile.
Right.
Because there's a constant there. You're referring to that constant. It works.
Yeah, I think that would be easier for plugins, at least. Yeah, because plugins do check that actually.
So we are saying that right now it just says deprecate word, but we are saying that we should say deprecated word, and we should add a comment that CO will not respect it actually. So you can set it, but.
And maybe we should have like a consistent format for doing this in case we have to do it in the future. Like, I liked what James suggested earlier, which was some sort of annotation for deprecated.
Okay.
Protobuf prior art for that. It seems like the
I think there's a built-in proto annotation for it. I'll let me see if I can dig around for it.
That'll be a good thing to use then.
Okay. We added the alpha annotations and like those fields, but yeah, okay, maybe we'll have to see if there's a built-in, or we'll have to add one. So, okay. I also wanted to sorry, Sat.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just taking that.
No, you were driving the discussion, but okay, be concrete. So we'll see if we can. We'll add a comment. We'll see if we can. We want to annotate it. So if there's no annotation, a pre-built-in, so should we write one in the alpha one, that the way we have designed it?
Yes, that would be good. But it sounds like based on what James is saying, there's already something that we can reuse.
Okay. So this is a must-have for this PR to merge. That okay? We need a.
We should.
Yeah, I see that you can mention deprecated equals true for fields. I don't know if you can mention that for other things. So someone's gonna have to play with that.
Okay. Okay. The other thing was like the wording, like we can just. So I have replaced wherever the example said offline expansion. In fact, in this place, I'm still using offline expansion, but I'm not talking about capability. It says SP does not permit control expansion of control publish volume. So like in the brackets, I've added there. And the error message now says volume in use failed precondition indicates that the volume corresponding to a specified volume ID could not be expanded because it is currently published on a node. Caller should ensure that. So it basically removes but the plugin does not have online expansion capability. So, and in another place, one more mention of the online offline capability is removed. We can. Does anyone have anything to add to this now, or we can discuss in the PR?
We can discuss it in the PR. I just want to make sure that all the comments are updated throughout the entire spec to indicate what the new default behavior is. And we have some section that describes if you want offline behavior, you know, include a thing that says we deprecated the online offline capability, but you can still have that behavior by using this volume and use error code, and then update the volume and use error code to include this new behavior. So just be very, very clear. If someone only read the spec, they should understand what happened, why it happened, and what they can do to do the right thing and what the default behavior is. And then release notes as well. I'm keeping track of all this in notes as well, so I'll
Okay,
post it.
perfect. Sorry. Okay, I was all right. Perfect. Okay. Anything else on this?
I think one more thing, Michelle, for Kubernetes 1.19 release, you mentioned that the release team does not want any kind of action required or breaking change things, and we're proposing getting this into CSI 1.3 and Kubernetes 1.19. Is that going to be a problem?
I think no.
I don't think so, because it's already broken, right? And here we're just saying that it's broken.
Yeah, we are not
And
making a
so
change. Sorry.
on the Kubernetes side, would we put this on an action required, or what release note would we put it under? And similarly, what release note would we put it under in CSI? Breaking change, I guess?
I mean, this is kind of on the Kubernetes side. I would probably put it more as like a known issue rather than an action required, because there's nothing that a plugin needs to change, really.
That makes sense. And for the CSI side, this would be, what would we call it in the release note?
It says the PR title says deprecates volume plugin's ability to declare offline online expansion capability. So ability for a plugin to declare online offline controller expansion capabilities via git plugin capabilities deprecated. A plugin may
We have a
support either
breaking
mode of
changes deprecation section, so we could just add it in there.
yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think we're good on the online, on the controller capability side. Go ahead and let's go to the next section or next discussion.
We talked a lot, like at length, about offline expansion on the node actually, and last time, and we discussed that okay, like whatever we do will not be able to solve Chris' use case that he had because he needs the read-only flag in the staging time, and the other mode of like allowing volume expansion before node is before a volume is available on a node requires node expand volume to do the volume discovery and everything actually. So I wonder if there's anyone who has such a use case to do like offline expansion on the node, and because we have a problem that if this is offline expansion on the node, then and it expansion on the node can only happen when a workload is scheduled to the node, unless there's some special action like a CO may do it. Kubernetes doesn't, but CO may do it. Schedule something on a node just to do the node expand volume. So
I think the biggest problem that I have with node expand volume is that it's very unclear when it's going to be called, right? The spec today says node expand volume must be called after a node stage. Okay, good, that's good. But node expand volume may be called before or after node publish. And so if that's the case, anytime after node stage is valid effectively. And I guess what we're arguing for now is saying, well, if it's up to the CO to determine what will work best for them, they can call it before node publish or after node publish, and the SP must handle either case. if the SP isn't happy with whichever way it's called, whether it's before or after, it needs to return an error code. And if it's called after node publish and it's unhappy, then the SP should do volume in use. And that should be an indication to the CO that it tried after node publish, so it should try before node publish. But what about the other case, which is the CO decides to call, because the spec allows it, before node publish, and the SP doesn't support that? What error code should be returned?
If this, it can, okay, can be. So if a CO calls before node publish, it can, what error codes support? I think there's no error code that exists that there. Actually, we could say the volume in use sounds like something wrong error code to return in that case, because CO can. So basically, we are saying that volume expand could be called after node stage, but not after node publish. That's correct.
It can be called after node stage, but it may be called before or after node publish is the current language.
Yeah. But what you're saying, the error code, but if the CO calls it before node publish.
Yeah, so if you have a CO that decides, hey, the spec allows me to call node expand before node publish. So it says, okay, spec allows it, I'm going to do that. But the plugin doesn't like that. It doesn't like being called node expand while it's not mounted. And it didn't implement stage, but all of that is allowed per the spec.
If it didn't implement node stage, then the spec says it must be called after. Actually, I think there's a wording that says that.
It says node expand volume must be called after successful node stage volume.
So
if the plugin has stage unstage volume node capability. So if you don't have the node otherwise, otherwise node expand volume must be called after. Oh, actually, no, I misread this. I think it's clear. So if there's a stage unstage capability, then it must be called after node stage, but it could be before node publish or after node publish.
Yeah.
If there's no node stage, then it has to be called after node publish. Okay. Yeah. So if that's the case, then I guess the only problem would be if you implement stage, but you can't do online, and for some reason you can't do you can only do online, and the CO calls you offline between node stage and node publish. What do you do in that case?
Yeah, I mean,
do we know of any such plugins?
I don't know of any such plugins actually, but
plugins that don't support stage?
Plugins that support stage but are online only for node expand.
But plugins that support node stage but can only support node expand volume after node publish.
So this falls into my category where, remember, node stage doesn't tell you the intent for use. It doesn't say if it's being intended to be used as read-only or not. It just gives you, because it's just a read-only mini volume. So in my case, I just choose not to mount to the global mount in node stage because I don't know the intent.
Okay, so basically we said, screw Chris. It's a hard case to solve.
And I'm fine by whatever.
Well, because the workaround that we have the same problem. The workaround, I mean, it's not that we can only do resize online, but we prefer to do it online. So the way we handle it is if we're between a node stage and a node publish and the expand call comes in, we just quickly do a mount in a temporary place, do the expand, and then unmount it. And we add all the appropriate cleanups to everywhere else to make sure that if that dies in the middle, we can recover from it. But it works. It's just like an extra 100 lines of code to deal with all the edge cases.
Okay, I think that's fine then. That was the only case that I can think of that might not be handled. So the happy normal case is if the plugin implements node stage, and on the Kubernetes side, do we check if node stage is implemented or not, and change behavior accordingly?
Yes, we can check if node stage is implemented. We call it after node stage. We call node expanded volume, and if it does not implemented, we call it afterwards.
Okay, and so the only additional logic we need to add on the Kubernetes side is the volume in use error code and adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
Okay, we should probably have like a mini design doc or something on the Kubernetes side on how we're going to handle these error codes because it's fairly complicated. But I think I'm fine with basically saying we're going to just amend the volume and use error code here and make it clear that it can be used to say, hey, I want offline behavior.
Okay. That was for controller expand volume. Node expand never had a capability, so it's
right. But we're saying that just to make it consistent and allow for the behavior, even though the behavior is implicitly allowed, like we should explicitly allow for this. So if the CO calls node expand after, like a plugin doesn't implement node stage, and the plugin gets node expand called after node publish, it should have a way to be able to say, hey, I don't support that.
Yeah.
Please don't call it.
Yeah, so it could return the volume in use error, and I think we have to work to like there's an action item here I have for like to handle volume in use in kubelet and the external controller both.
Right. The Kubernetes logic, I think, is going to get fairly yucky. So let's do like a mini design doc. It could be in a PR or in a GitHub issue or something. It doesn't have to be a full cap.
Okay.
But I think it's worth writing out just to go through all the if-else possibilities.
Okay.
So,
sorry.
I was going to say, just for Chris's benefit, this funny issue of like not knowing whether it's going to be read-only at node stage time can be worked around if it's important to you, because the only way you can end up with a staged volume that you can't write is if the controller publish was done read-only for whatever reason. And you can tell yourself that by putting information in the publish context at controller publish time that will get passed to the node at node stage time that could tell you if for whatever reason it somehow got published read-only. What will typically happen is Kubernetes will always call controller publish with read-only equals false, even if it's going to be used read-only on the node. So you are able to mount it writable and do any resizing you want to do, even if the pod that's eventually going to use it isn't supposed to be able to write to that volume. You can your plugin can still write to the volume for the purposes of a resize. And so I have to play this trick where I sort of keep track of, can the node write or not, and send that information from the controller to the node so that he knows at stage time what he can do and what he can't do.
Should we document that somewhere? I'm not sure the spec itself is the right place to do it, but maybe the Kubernetes CSI documentation.
So if you read everything, it does become clear. It's just it's extraordinarily subtle because read-only is called out in so many different places with so many different flavors. And basically, if you just read one part, it's never clear. But if you read everything, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I just had to spend a long time figuring out all the different ways read-only works, and it finally started to make sense. The other huge gotcha with Kubernetes, at least, is Kubernetes will never call controller publish with read only equals true unless you synthesize a PV object yourself with read only equals true, because we never added a feature to the provisioner sidecar for creation of read only volumes. It just can't do it yet. We could add a
Well,
feature in
it
the
also
future.
doesn't make sense to provision a blank volume as read only because
It doesn't make
there's nothing
sense,
to
but doesn't mean someone wouldn't want to do it. And to be clear, like it does make sense to have a read only volume that is a clone of a snapshot.
Yeah, my use case is mostly the user still wants to build a popular volume, so you deal with the not the guardrail free Kubernetes implementation of read only mini, where there's no attach detach controller logic for it, and the user will mount a read write via a pod or job with retry count 0, write their data to it, and once that's gone, they will use it as read only.
Yeah. There's also some other use cases where some CSI plugins do hacks where the external provisioner sidecar thinks it's creating an empty volume, but it's actually with this.
Okay, so Ben,
So I'm just saying that there are reasons to do read-only volumes. Yeah, I'm getting into a rat hole, so I'll stop talking.
yeah, I just want to like bring the sorry. Is it fair to say that like I want to had one more CSI specs related change for volume expansion that I want to discuss like before this call? So it's like the read only handling. That's the one that you want to discuss. Like the spec currently says that okay, you can expand node expand volume can be called on both read only, non-read only volume, read write volume, doesn't matter. But there are some plugins that may not like that, like they may not support read only node expansion. So I have another PR open that changes the error code on the node expand volume to say volume in use or read only, indicates that the volume corresponding to the specified volume ID could not be expanded because it's not published, no stage or read only, and the storage provider does not support expansion of published or stage or read only volumes. So, and this is something I want to get in the CSS spec in 1.x preferably. So
I think that seems fine to me. Anybody have concerns with this?
Is it the case that if it's read only, a plugin has to return this because it can't execute a resize, or that a plugin just may return this because it doesn't support a resize for read only?
so if a plugin should return it so that the Kubernetes does not call it again. If plugin does not return it, so Kubernetes will call it again and again. So that's the distinction.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're clear for, if I'm coming at this from like a non-Kubernetes context,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm writing a plugin that I want to work with all different COs. And I'm looking at this spec and I'm reading this error code. Does this error code mean that I should not support resize for read only? Or that I can support it for read only?
It
Yeah,
means
that's an important distinction.
it says that the storage provider, if it supports, then it does not return this error code. But if
Yeah, it's up to the plugin to decide, I think, should be the behavior.
Can we just make that, sorry, go ahead, Sad.
Yeah, I mean, if a plugin wants to, they should be able to do it. But like Chris's case, where he explicitly does not want read-only to be resized, he should also be able to have the option to do that.
Yeah, so can we just make that clear that a plugin has a choice? Because that, just from reading the, trying to like infer that from an error code, I can see where that might lead to confusion. So
So the wording says the storage provider does not support expansion if the storage provider does not support expansion of published or stage or read-only volumes.
So I'm not arguing with the wording in the error code here. What I'm saying is please add a sentence somewhere else that
Okay.
says a plugin may or may not support resizing read-only volumes,
Okay.
right? Just so it's crystal clear, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody
Yeah.
else?
Sorry.
Yep, agreed.
Great.
Okay, so it sounds like there are 3 sets of changes that need to be merged into the CSI spec. One is deprecation of the online-offline capability and the associated changes, updating the entire spec to take that into account. Second is this change around read-only. And the third is kind of adding language to indicate that if a plugin wants offline behavior for, node expand, they can use this volume and use error code. Does that sound like the only changes we need, or do we think we need something else?
Wait a second. So for the third one, like the plugin does not support expansion of node published volume, but it does support expansion of node stage volume. Do we need a languages, because this error code handles it, but maybe we want to do you want to be more explicit?
I want it to be a bit more explicit somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this error code, but maybe a line in the description of the actual node expand to say if you don't support online resizing, or you don't even have to use the word online, but say resizing while the volume is in use.
Mm-hmm.
Here are kind of your options. If you implemented node stage, you can, if you implement node stage, then actually it doesn't matter whether you implement node stage or not. If you don't implement it and it gets called while the volume is in use, you should return this error code and the CO should do this, something like that, just to make sure it's very explicitly called out.
So just to understand this, so if a CO calls, if CO calls node expand volume, after before node publish, like before node publish, or like how do I word it? I'm just trying to think, like
I think what I would use, I like the word volume in use. So I would start with that and say, if an SP does not support node expand volume while volume is in use, they should return this error code to indicate that that they don't support it, and a CO shall not retry while the volume is in use and wait until the volume is no longer in use before retrying, something like that.
The problem with volume in use wording, at least, and like we know we use it in error codes, but in other places we don't have a concept of volume in use, like in terms of like as far as CSI is concerned, if node publish is done, that volume is in use, like, or even we don't say that, but we don't have a distinction that, okay, node publish is done, or it is node published but not in used. That boundary does not exist.
So what do we say in this error code? How do we define volume in use? Indicates that the volume corresponding to this ID could not be expanded because it is node published or node staged or read-only, and the storage provider does not support expansion of published or staged. I guess I can buy the argument that it's kind of difficult to have that wording because we don't have an official definition for what volume in use is.
Yeah.
and just leaving it here is sufficient. It would also discourage people from using offline, because offline is not really a good user experience. Okay, I can be convinced that it's unnecessary to add further wording around offline for node expand. What do other people think?
Let me quickly, I think I described my use case before, but the reason, so I do it when it's online, and I need to do it after first publish or after knowing that it had been recently published. And the reason for that is I set up a de-encrypt device using Lux, and I found it problematic to resize the Lux device where it auto resizes upon a new mount. So if you delete your pod and it goes somewhere else, the resize works seamlessly because the device mapper device auto resizes itself upon connecting to a new setup.
Yeah, basically you got around this by not even implementing a node expand and just hijacking the node publish to do the expand silently.
No,
Yeah, and
Chris
I
could
don't care
have.
if
I
I don't
just
care if there's 5 pods using it either. I only care that I just check to see if the device is different size, and I do it.
so
Sorry, go ahead.
Chris could have he could have actually, if he supports node expand like only after node stage but before node publish. He doesn't support, like let's say he doesn't support node expand volume after node publish, so he has option of returning volume in use error code. So okay, volume in use is node stage, it's node published and I don't support expansion of node published volume, so he could return the error code there and that will work. But the problem that the reason he cannot do that is because like he cannot allow node expansion after node stage also, because he needs to know volume is read only or not. So after
Yeah,
node,
I agree that we're not trying to solve Chris's case. Like I think we've written that off and said, hey, he has a hack, he can continue to do the hack, and that's not a use case that we're trying to support. The use case that I'm more concerned about is someone who doesn't care whether it was mounted read-only or not. They implemented node stage, and in node stage, it's always mounted read-write. And they don't support online. So when we call them online, they should be able to fall back and say, hey, I don't support online, please give me off.
so the wording should be like, if the node expand volume is called after node publish, then you would return a volume in use error. That's it. And then the CO will respect it, and it will only expand the volume when the volume is first mounted.
Right.
It's possible already.
But
so,
it has to be before node stage then, right? In that case.
After node stage, I guess.
After node stage.
But if you use node stage and you mount to the global mount, but it has to be offline and you're already online because it's already mounted.
Oh, good point.
It depends on what we call on, so saying calling node stage volume is node stage, is it online or offline? Because certain file system, as we discussed, require the volume to be online before you could expand it.
I think that's the majority case.
Yeah. So in the sense offline, in the sense, in Sal's case, that I think he was thinking that once a workload has started running it, I don't want expansion to happen on it, and that is what is supported if you only allow expansion after node stage, but not after node publish.
We should have just supported online.
There's a valid use case that the want to, there are some use people who might want to just support after node stage and before.
Yeah, but they can't do the hacks like Chris.
They can just return they can just expand the volume if it is called after node stage and return and support it, and if it gets called after node publish, then return this volume in use error, that okay, I don't support expansion anymore, like of the node published volumes. Indicates that the volume could not be expanded because it's node published, so I don't support expansion of node published volumes.
Okay, so how do we want to proceed?
On the third point, we can add a wording, that if a driver does not support expansion of node published volumes, it could just return volume in use error. It's already possible. We can add a line here if you wanted, but yeah.
Okay. I have no objections to that, but I can't predict if this is going to fix all the issues that everyone's having. I'm going to look to the folks on this call who have implemented drivers and have run into this. I think the only person who's run into this issue is Chris, and we've agreed that it doesn't fix his issue. Anybody else have any objections to this? Okay, let's go forward with it then. We need to cut the 1.3 release by next week in order to keep the volume health changes on track. So can we get all these changes merged by Friday? Or target that at the very least?
I think so I'll update the PRs today, tomorrow, like tomorrow-ish, these two PRs, and then it might, I think the trickiest bit might be to figuring out, okay, the deprecation annotation and how it will look like and everything. But yeah.
Well, let's try for it. And if on Monday we're not in a good place, we could re-meet to figure out the next steps. I really want to make sure that we don't block the volume health stuff as we go forward.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. Anything else before we call it? All right, thank you all for attending, and please take a look at the PRs when they come out. I think everybody on this call has invaluable feedback, so please take a look. All right, thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.